You ever feel trapped by something really small? You know, like a minor habit, a silly grudge, or some tiny little desire you just can't seem to shake? Well, today we are diving into an ancient story that gives us this incredible insight into why the smallest things can sometimes have the tightest grip on us. So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with a monk's personal story, then get into the main event, the parable of the quail. After that, we'll look at strong versus weak bonds, 4 different types of people, the path to freedom, and we'll wrap up with a question for all of us to think about. All right, so our story kicks off not with some big, heavy philosophical lecture, but with something really simple and personal. It's a reflection from a monk named Udai, right after he finished meditating. As he was sitting there, this was the feeling that just washed over him. He had this powerful realization about how much peace he'd found by following the Buddha's guidance. But what specifically caused this huge wave of gratitude? Believe it or not, it was all about food. Udai thinks back to how the monks used to eat several times a day. Then, the Buddha suggested they give up their afternoon meals. And Udai is honest. He says he was pretty bummed out about it. That's when people offered the best food. Later, the Buddha asked them to also stop eating at night, and that was even tougher. Why? Because in his own words, whatever delicacies there were, they were all at night. I mean, how relatable is that? That feeling of not wanting to give up a small pleasure. But here's the thing. By letting go, he didn't find loss. He found this profound sense of well-being and freedom. So when Udai shares this story with the Buddha sees a perfect teaching moment. He uses it to explain this deep, universal truth about how attachment works. And that brings us to this central metaphor for this whole explainer. The Buddha points out that when he asks people to let go of something small, like an evening meal, some of them get skeptical. They get annoyed, they think he's just being difficult about something totally insignificant. They refuse to let it go, and by doing that, they actually forge this incredibly powerful chain for themselves. And this brings us to the absolute key concept today, bandhanam. That's the Pali word for a bond or a fetter. And it's not just a physical thing, like a rope. It's the mental chain of attachment that really, truly holds us prisoner. And this is where the parable of the quail just illustrates the paradox so brilliantly. Imagine a little quail that gets its foot tangled in a weak, rotting vine, a putsilata. Physically, this vine is pathetic. It's got no strength at all. But for that quail, which doesn't even try to pull away, that flimsy little vine becomes a balavam bandhanam, a strong, solid, unbreakable bond that decides its fate. The prison isn't the vine. The prison is in the mind. To really hammer this point home, the Buddha then tells a few more contrasting stories, and they're all designed to show that the real power of any bond is purely psychological. Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. This chart lays out the core paradox perfectly. You've got 4 characters, a poor man, a rich man, our little quail, and a massive royal elephant. And their stories just completely flip our expectations about what it means to be trapped. Look at how the nature of bond doesn't really match up with the possessions. It's all about what's going on inside. So first up is a poor man. He's got almost nothing, just a rundown hut, a terrible cot, and a single pot of grain. He sees how peaceful a monk's life is, and he wants that. But he just can't bring himself to let go of his few broken things. For him, they're a strong bond. Now contrast that with a super wealthy man. Piles of gold, huge estates, tons of servants. He also sees the peace of a monk's life. And just like that, he's able to renounce his immense fortune without a second thought to go after that freedom. For him, the bond to all that wealth is actually weak. And that brings us back to our quail. Stuck, not because the vine is strong, but because the quail itself isn't willing to even test the bond. It's trapped by its own idea of being trapped. And finally, you have this magnificent royal elephant, tied up with thick, strong leather ropes. But with just a little flex, it snaps those ropes and walks away completely free. What should be an unbreakable prison is, to the elephant, nothing. So the crucial point here is that the strength of our chains is decided by our mind, not by the things we're attached to. So how does this actually apply to us? How do we relate to these inner bonds in our own lives? Well, the Buddha shifts from telling stories to this really direct psychological analysis, and he identifies 4 different types of people. He outlines 4 ways we tend to deal with attachments when they pop up. There's the endurer, who just kind of lets them hang around. There's the fighter who actively tries to crush them. Then there's the mindful person who notices them arise but lets them go pretty quickly. And finally, the liberated person who is totally free. But here's the kicker. The Buddha says the first three are all still considered bound. So get this, whether you're clinging to your attachments, fighting them, or just letting them go quickly, as long as they have a place to land in your mind, you're still tied up in some way. It's only that fourth type, the one who truly understands that attachment itself is the problem, who is really truly free. Okay, so it's not all bad news. We've got the diagnosis, but there's also a solution. The Buddha provides a super clear, step-by-step path to becoming unbound. The path is basically a ladder of letting go, and it mirrors the stages of deep meditation. You start with the obvious stuff, letting go of attachments to sensory things, then you let go of the mental chatter, all that thinking. But then it gets really wild. You even let go of positive things like joy, and then happiness, and eventually you let go of the most subtle levels of your own perception and consciousness. It's a pretty radical idea of what freedom really means. And at every single rung on this ladder, the instruction never changes. It's relentless and it's consistent. Abandon it, transcend it, let it go. Even the most beautiful, blissful states of mind are just another thing to be released if you want complete and total freedom. And this brings the whole lesson right back to us sitting here right now. The focus shifts from these ancient stories and parables directly onto our own personal experience. The Buddha wraps up his talk by asking Udayi this incredibly powerful question. He basically says, can you think of any bond, any chain, tiny or huge, that I don't tell you to let go of? And the answer, of course, is no. This path is about total liberation from everything. And so we end right back with our central image, the pupilata, the rotten vine. It's just the perfect symbol for those things that seem so insignificant. A petty annoyance, a favorite coffee mug, a recurring negative thought. The things we don't bother struggling against, and because of that, they become our prison. So the final question isn't for a monk in some ancient forest. It's for you, right now. What is that small, seemingly trivial thing in your life that you're not really struggling against? What is your rotten vine?